Dear friends, dreamers, and guardians of the secrets that flutter under the Istanbul night, welcome to a new, unmissable chapter from Turkish Spotlight Secrets. Tonight we are not here to list who wore what or to count who clinked more glasses. Tonight we dive into the pulse of a single moment, a midnight that seemed to hold its breath, when, amid the sparkle of New Year's Eve, an intimacy bloomed so intense it felt like the room itself dimmed around it. Our two protagonists have ridden the edges of fate before, surviving storms of headlines and the weight of too many eyes, Yaman and Demet Özdemir. While the city counted down to a new year, they counted something far more private, something that could alter not just their path but the entire story their fans believe they know. Before we unfold every fragment of this mystery that's lighting up the internet, give us a sign of allegiance. If your heart beats for stories that glow long after the music fades, subscribe now, hit the bell, and consider clicking the join button. Becoming an official member of the Turkish Spotlight Secrets family is how you step behind the curtain, where whispers turn into truths others barely dare to breathe. Are you ready to hear what Can and Demet exchanged while fireworks rained upon the Bosphorus? New Year's Eve in celebrity land usually means noise, swagger, and declarations shouted louder than the music. But this time, the shock of the night didn't erupt from a stage. It throbbed from a secluded corner at a private celebration, far from the lenses of the mainstream. The location was a refuge of velvet and hush, a place where privacy was meant to be sacred. Yaman and Demet Özdemir were there together, not as a spectacle, but surrounded by a small circle of friends who know them beyond headlines. As the playlist drifted into slower songs and the air softened, something unexpected spilled into the quiet between them. Witnesses, lucky enough to be close but polite enough to keep a distance, say that Demet, eyes luminous with a mix of sweetness and urgency, touched Can's arm and asked him to step away from the glitter of toasts for a moment. She chose a spot where the lights were low and the noise softened into a distant thrum. What happened next, according to those who watched with the discretion of people who understand the value of privacy, changed the evening's temperature. It wasn't a polite exchange or a routine check-in. It was an emotional tremor, almost visible. Those near enough to catch the outline of their faces described the way Demet leaned close, how her words met his ear like a confession wrapped in care. And how Can's expression shifted in a heartbeat. Surprise, then relief, then a tenderness that softened the strong lines of his jaw. And then, a gesture that made time feel slow, Can drew Demet into a deep, sheltering embrace. Not the hug of colleagues. Not even the half-measured clasp of old friends. It was the hold of a man who had just heard the kind of news that rearranges a universe. They returned to their seats wrapped in a quiet no one dared puncture. Demet looked radiant, but charged with a nervous shimmer. Her hands, so often poetry when she dances, spoke their own language as she talked softly, punctuating phrases with the graceful arcs fans know by heart. Can listened with a gravity that drew eyes without him uttering a single word, the kind of stillness that doesn't freeze a room but anchors it. It was the image of a man recalibrating the stars he orbits by. It didn't take long for the first blurred snaps to surface. They slipped onto social feeds like sparks, small, hot, impossible to ignore. In the photos, Demet wore a flowing, elegantly draped dress, the kind that schemes the body without tracing every line. Within minutes, comment sections were buzzing, threads swelled into storms, and speculation wrote itself in caps lock. The rumor whipping through the gossip corridors reduced to a single, exquisite question: did Demet hint at a pregnancy in that private exchange? The choice of a loose silhouette, the ferocity of Can's embrace, and the protectiveness he wore like a second skin, put them together, and you had a narrative fans devoured before dessert. Dear friends of Turkish Spotlight Secrets, pause and breathe with me. Look inward for a second. Was that embrace a celebration of a new heartbeat, or was it the kind of spiritual closeness only two people with a history can conjure on a night heavy with meaning? Tell us what your intuition screams in the comments. Members who click join will see their questions and theories rise to the top of our replies and deep dive analyses. As always, when the stakes are this tender and this high, the internet splits like a storm cloud. Skeptics step forward with diagrams and logic, insisting all we saw was an angle, a lucky lens, a comfortable dress for a long night. It's just a cut made for dancing, they insist, siding with reason. Across the aisle, romantics, and the long-term watchers who have followed every hint and echo of their story, shake their heads and smile. After everything, nothing shocks us. If any two could drop a bombshell on a quiet New Year's Eve, it's them, they declare with a certainty that feels like devotion. What compounds the intrigue is what came after. Demet, who has never been reckless but who once let fans peek at moments of her days, drew a clear border overnight. She posted less, spoke less, returned to a rhythm that locked out unnecessary noise. On the record, she defended her right to keep what matters safe from the machine that chews tenderness into clickbait. Off the record, those who orbit her say she has slipped into a measured routine, fewer parties, 0 appearances unless a set calls her name, and evenings traded for tranquility. Is it a tactical pause to soothe a weary mind? A cocoon to protect a delicate chapter's earliest pages? Or simply the wisdom of a woman who knows how vicious a rumor can be when it splinters? We cannot say. Absence, as always, breeds appetite. On Can's side, a deliberate calm rules. Among friends, he is reflective, measured, a man of fewer words and deeper eyes. He keeps future plans zipped beneath a leather jacket of mystery, and his silence hums with a steadiness you can feel from across a room. Some read this as growth, a man coming into responsibilities he would name only when ready. Others hear thunder behind the quiet. The fact that they haven't been photographed together in the days after that night only feeds the endless mill of speculation. And the industry, quick to sniff out disruption, has already started murmuring. There are producers and colleagues who worry about distraction tugging at Demet's name, who wonder aloud how any new narrative might brush against schedules, commitments, sets. Yet even the loudest whispers have to bow before a single truth. On set, Demet hasn't missed a heartbeat. She arrives prepared, composed, laser-focused. The kind of presence that commands respect, rearranges gossip into silence, and reminds people that a craft can swallow chaos when the artist is disciplined enough. Fans salute this clarity, reading it as her refusal to let the personal shadow the professional. Others interpret it as her way of drawing light back to the work, away from her midsection, away from everything anyone thinks they see. Zoom in a little more and the smallest shifts take on tints of meaning. Sources familiar with the couple's circle hint that, in the weeks after the party, family time multiplied. More calls, more dinners, more behind-closed-doors gatherings where laughter replaces lenses. If something momentous were brewing, this is exactly what you would expect, the changing of the guard before the announcement, the quiet choreography that comes before a public step. Yet to some, it is only life. The kind even the famous continue to live when the camera blinks. Without context, the everyday becomes a breadcrumb trail. A cardigan worn twice is suddenly a clue. A skipped invitation mutates into a theory. A caption that skips a certain word turns into a riddle. Can and Demet do not move a centimeter toward the chatter, and so the crowd fills the gaps with the stories they crave. For those who know their arc, none of this is simple. Their myth was born from a set and fed by sparks that no camera could fully contain, then pressed by distance and the pressure cooker of attention. The pull between them, romantic, creative, gravitational, has never been subtle. That is why this whisper has caught like tinder. It dovetails with the narrative that fans have written for years, that their story is a braid of fate and choice, parted and replated, fragile in public but resilient in private. Some hearts want to believe this is the prologue of a gentler chapter, perhaps even the last turn before everything clicks. Others, hardened by past false alarms, insist on proof stamped in daylight. And in the quiet center sit Can and Demet, two people who seem to be measuring their steps against a clock that belongs only to them. If they decide to speak, a single sentence could flip the tide. If they were to share one picture, the oxygen in this room of rumors would shift in an instant. A moment in the sun could close the book on speculation, or open one even more captivating. Until then, every shadow becomes an interpretation, every silence a headline in waiting. Here's what we know, they are not rushing. Here's what we can surmise, if and when they speak, it will not be accidental. The cameras will be primed, captions already perched on keyboards, and the noise will surge before it dissolves into the gentler hush of whatever truth they choose to lay before us. Dear friends of Turkish Spotlight Secrets, whatever unfolded at that hidden New Year's Eve party, whether it was a tender confession, a secret bright enough to make two people hold tighter, or simply the invaluable act of carving privacy out of a loud world, has planted a seed in the minds of fans across continents. And until Kenyaman and Demet Özdemir answer, the question will keep moving from talk show sofas to kitchen tables, crossing timelines like a passport-stamped rumor. The rest is patience. The rest is their call, and theirs alone. We'll be here, your steady watchers and storytellers, ready for the moment their silence breaks into something we can name. Thank you for spending your evening with us. Don't forget to subscribe and click join, so we can keep walking this road together, one heartbeat at a time. Now, while the city returns to its usual rhythm and the confetti dissolves into memory, listen closely to the quieter clues that have always told their story. Demet's grace has always been a language. When she chooses stillness, it speaks as loudly as any performance. Can's intensity has always been a shield. When it softens, it does so for a reason. These are the micro-moments that fans have learned to read, the notes between notes that translate a private melody into something the public can feel without hearing. The night in question generated no official statements, but it revealed a vocabulary of touch and glance that longtime observers recognize. The way his hand found the small of her back when they rejoined the group. The way she pressed her cheek to his shoulder for a beat too long for mere nostalgia. The protectiveness that followed him across the room like an aura. None of this is evidence, and none of it is law. But in the Church of Romance, ritual matters. If you have followed their chapters, the bright beginnings, the hushed interludes, the distance that made headlines and the silences that built myth, you already know how easily a night can become a symbol. New Year's Eve is loaded with promises by design: restart, renew, reveal. Perhaps that's why this story found oxygen so quickly. Perhaps the calendar's magic pressed the moment into a shape we could hold. Or perhaps, just perhaps, the rumor has roots. Time will tell, as it always does. Until then, hold your theories tenderly, treat your hopes with care, and remember that behind the lights and followers stand two people trying to make a choice in peace. To our members, your support keeps this space honest and brave. You allow Turkish Spotlight Secrets to spend the hours it takes to separate heat from light, pattern from projection. To everyone watching, we promise this: when the day comes that a caption replaces conjecture, you will hear it here first. If the whisper becomes truth, we'll celebrate with you. If it turns out to be a misread of a quiet embrace, we'll honor that too. Because at the center of every story worth telling are not our expectations, but their humanity. And that, more than any rumor, is what we guard. So we wait. Not idly, not impatiently, just with the kind of attention this story deserves. If that midnight hug signaled a new beginning, it will bloom in its own hour. If it was simply a refuge two people found in each other on a crowded night, it was beautiful enough to be remembered on its own. Either way, the page will turn, and we'll be here to read it with you. Subscribe, click join, and keep your heart open. The fireworks may be over, but something is still flickering on the horizon, warm and steady as a candle in a window, guiding us to whatever comes next for Can and Demet.